Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com. Theboxinggame.blogspot.com for outside the ring issues. Here with some social commentary on a breaking story that is rapidly making its way around the net of a Sports Illustrated article which is being commented upon on sites like boxingscene.com about what's being called on boxingscene.com Pacquiao's gambling addiction. According to what they're terming Pacquiao associates, Manny Pacquiao once had to ask Bob Arum for a $2 million advance in order to pay off gambling debts. Bob Arum apparently spoke with, I believe it's Sports Illustrated, and he acknowledged that he actually had to have wired hundreds of thousands of dollars to casinos, in Arum's words, 5 or 6 times to help Manny Pacquiao pay his debts. Now, as many know, I run a site called gamblersadvisory.com. I actually believe in gambling on sports. And I think it's important, as gambling gets ripped by the mainstream media, to at least have a counterbalancing point of view. In my opinion, whether it's sports gambling, whether it's stock gambling, whether it's having the government back loans of tens of thousands of dollars to 18 and 19-year-olds with no credit history so they could pay for schools, it's all risk management. Understand, no risk, no reward. You think about society and you think about people who are contributing greatly to society, and in many instances, that started with risk-taking. I see little difference between trading stock derivatives, hedging financial investments, and hedging bets on sports. Let me also point out, too, that many people will say, well, a financial investment is structured slightly differently than the typical sports bet. Well, if you've ever been to a casino more than 5 minutes, you realize that there is no such thing as the typical sports bet. There are point spreads. There are money lines. There are, if you're a baseball bettor, run lines. Just like there are stock futures, there are betting futures. There are in-game lines. In other words, if you know your way around a casino, if you've lived a little bit, if you've teased a bet, if you've bet a parlay, you understand that the amount of risk you take is really based on your own risk tolerance. You have choices when you enter a casino. As I'm making this video, Djokovic is playing Federer in the semis of the French Open. You can actually bet on that bet live as it's unfolding when a lot of the risk is gone. We know who's won the first set. As longtime viewers of mine know, I often, in fact, dare I say, more times than not, recommend what I call straddles. I'll say when I believe that a puncher has a puncher's chance in a fight, but that I don't believe he's going to win the fight. So I'm advocating people being on both sides of the bet with different options. There are ways to hedge risk in sports betting. Let me also point out, too, that structurally, you'll hear stories like this much more than you'll hear stories of people winning money gambling. Because, of course, the winners have no desire to be pressured to give away their gambling secrets. Also, the winners may face different tax consequences for talking up their gambling victories. Let me go one step further and say that in gambling, just like in stock investing, people who are in the game for a while understand that today's win might become tomorrow's loss. You're going to have winners and losers. So if you're in a sports book and you're having a good day and you've made a lot of money, you're going to be a little bit tempered in your enthusiasm because you'll realize that it easily could have gone the other way. Not only that, tomorrow you might actually use the same betting approach and might not be as successful. It's a thin line between winning and losing. Let me tell you a story that happened within the last 24 hours. I was looking at the Boston Celtic Miami Heat game. The Celtics got derailed. They were off the rails. I was in a sports bar. As the game continued, the line kept dropping, right? The Heat were putting on a clinic. Literally, toward the end of the game, I made a bet with a guy there. I got 19.5 points. In fact, the live betting at casinos at the end of the game was 19.5. So as everybody in the bar was looking elsewhere, right? The lead was 20 when a Boston Celtic got fouled and was on the free throw line, right? All he has to do is make one of the two free throws. And if you had Boston plus 19.5, you won the bet. But as I was in the sports bar, nobody other than myself and the guy next to me cared about whether he made the free throw because for them, the game was long decided. So of course, this young guy takes the first free throw and misses the first free throw. So my bet, after 48 minutes of basketball with about 2 seconds left, literally came down to whether or not this Boston Celtic on the free throw line, who was not Rajon Rondo, he was not Paul Pierce, he was not Ray Allen, he was not Kevin Durant, this is a guy, it's Kevin Garnett, this is a guy deep on the bench. My bet came down to whether or not he hit the last free throw. Fortunately, he did. Had he not, I might not have, I might not be in the great mood I am in today. If you're a gambler, you understand that these bets come down to, literally, at times, that last free throw. I've won bets that I've really lost in the ring, right? Carl Froch, Andre Durrell. I picked Froch. Quite frankly, I thought Durrell won that fight, right? In fact, let's go further. Carl Froch, an underdog against Jermaine Taylor. Carl Froch was losing that fight with literally just, I believe, 60 seconds to go and somehow was able to come back. I'm not here to pretend or to say that gambling is not dangerous. What I am here to say, though, is that if you think about the risk around you, I would say that gambling is no more dangerous than a lot of the risks that society routinely takes in everyday transactions. As I've said before, take student loans. You have the public treasury here in the United States backing student loans to teenagers with no credit history who literally collectively have a debt. Oh gee, of course my phone's ringing now. Who collectively have a debt greater than the amount of credit card debt in the United States, right? And so my point to you is simply, when you hear about things like the housing crisis in the United States, where people are buying assets worth hundreds of thousands of dollars with no money down, again, in transactions that at least are partially backed by the United States government, I find it a bit astonishing that anyone would then decide that sports gambling is too risky for society to allow. I hope we reevaluate this. Yes, there will be stories like this Manny Pacquiao gambling story. I believe athletes are particularly vulnerable to believing that they have inside information, and they also want to win the conquest. But all I'm saying is risk can be managed, whether it's in financial investments, home lending, student lending, or sports betting. And this Manny Pacquiao story shouldn't lead people to believe that sports risk can't be managed, that a gambler can't make a bet even in the middle of a game where one team is getting killed and still not be able to profit off a plus 19.5 cover. Right? Manny Pacquiao's big mistake here wasn't gambling. Manny Pacquiao's big mistake here, in my opinion, was making bad picks. Let me hear from you. Just another point of view here on YouTube. Let me hear from you. Leave your comments for me here on YouTube, and also visit us at theboxinggame.blogspot.com, where we try to follow what happens to fighters outside the ring, where we try to follow stories like this Manny Pacquiao gambling story. Thanks for watching.